right? So there's marches, there's protests, there's people complaining online and up and down the street that the rates suck and they want the government to get involved, okay? Now, this is my opinion on what I think the government can do to actually legitimately increase the rates, okay? 3 things, that's what I got for you today. Now, a quick business lesson, I'm not saying I'm a business person by any means, but it's simple business 101, supply and demand, right? We have a whole bunch of trucks and not enough loads, right? So we have a lot of supply and no demand, right? That's literally what we have. This is a situation that we are finding ourselves in because of what's going on. So the absolute quickest way we can address the supply and demand issue is make more demand, which means we need to put everybody back to work. People need to go back to their jobs. Everything needs to return back to normal. To my understanding, the shutdown was there so that we don't overwhelm the hospitals. Well, clearly the hospitals are not overwhelmed. Clearly, right? Clearly there isn't as big of a need for what we've been told. There is not a need for any of that. So we really desperately need to put people back to work so that then the economy can start taking up and people can start consuming, because 70% of the American economy, I think it's something like that. I remember reading an article, something about 70% is consumerism, okay? And that's people consuming products. So understand, we need to get people back out there to work. We need to start having them get paychecks so they can start buying things so that then we can start transporting. So number 1, we need to open America back up for business. So that's a good place to start. Now, the second thing is we need to cut out some of the bad apples, okay? And unfortunately, it starts with brokerages. Brokers stay open up there, they go get their authority, not authority, but they go get their authority and then they go get their bond. And because the bond is only $75,000, it's really cheap to get into. Super cheap. And there's constantly stories about brokers getting in, underbidding, undercutting all of the other rates, and then posting on the board for a higher rate, fully knowing that they're not going to pay the carrier, right? There's actual stories like that. Brokers undercut the rates and then post it on the board for much more than they have in it, just so that the carrier can haul it, and then they'll, basically that's kind of a little scam that some brokers do. And what happens is they do that really quickly for a short amount of time, and they exceed the $75,000 bond. And so what happens is then the carrier tries to claim on the bond, but because there's multiple carriers that claim in excess of $75,000, a carrier only gets a small percentage of what they actually agreed to. And that's a legitimate problem. And so we need to nip that in the bud, guys, unfortunately, we just got to raise the bond. There's no other way. Number 2 is we have to raise the broker bond. I don't know, because it used to be $25,000 and then it went up to $75,000. And I think it won't be a bad thing if we double it up and we call it $150,000. $150,000, that's a lot of freight. A lot of carriers can get paid in case the brokerage does shut down, and it'll increase their overhead, therefore making it more challenging to get into, so that then brokers aren't undercutting each other's throats, because now they have a legitimate overhead to pay for. So that's number 2. We need to do that as well. We need to raise the broker bond, okay? Now, we've addressed, we need to get America back to work. We've addressed brokers undercutting each other. And then we need to address the least exciting part is people like me, okay? And specifically what I mean is non-CDL hotshot. Unfortunately, the operating costs for non-CDL are super low, extremely low, okay? And what that means is I and people like me can go out there and undercut truckers, can undercut CDL trucks, CDL hotshots. We can go do that because our operating cost is lower. So I think, and this is number 3, I think another solution to raise the rates permanently is to get rid of this loophole. And it's not even a loophole per se. It's the law is very, very clear. If your combination rating is under 26,000, regardless of how it's split up, it could be 10 on the truck, 16 on the trailer, it could be 16 on the truck, 10 on the trailer, doesn't matter. Regardless of how it's split up, to under 26,001 pound does not need a CDL. It's very, very clear, except for California, right? So understand, but for some reason California rates are still dirt cheap, by the way. So I don't know. That's why there should be a combination. So I think, simply put, non-CDL hotshots should not exist. The threshold should be 10,000 pounds, like it is right now. Right now it's 10,000 pounds or 10,001 pound or more. You need a logbook, you need a medical card, and anything under 10,000 pounds, you don't need any of that. That's where the CDL should be. And so what that would do is, then let's say you're a truck driver, right? And you lose your medical card. That doesn't mean you have to get out of transportation in general. You just got to go drive a Sprinter van, and there you don't have to have a medical card, right? And so you could go do that. And that's why the rates on Sprinter vans will always be kind of low, because that's like very, very entry level, right? There's low qualifications. But for example, anything over a Sprinter van essentially is, you got to go get your CDL, and that needs to be like, it has to be like that. That'll increase the overhead, you know, that'll make the barrier to entry a little bit harder, therefore increasing the rate per mile. And I think between those three things, that's not something out of the ordinary. Like, that's not a stretch. You know, the government could absolutely do that. They really could. And it's not like, you know, guaranteed minimum. You know how I saw online, people are saying, oh, well, there's a minimum wage, there should be a minimum rate. Oh my goodness, absolutely not. That would ruin everything. So I don't think that's the solution at all. However, these three things I think are totally realistic, something the government could absolutely do. And now that I think Trump passed the thing where he told the lady she has a lot more flexibility to pass or cut regulation or whatever he said. So really, guys, it's clear that these three things in conjunction could give a boost to the rates. They absolutely could. And I don't know if it's legitimate a long term, because what I would do is I would just go get my CDL and just keep driving this truck. And so it's like, well, my operating costs would very much stay the same. I would just have to take 2 weeks off to go do it. And so really, but that's why you can't just do one of these individually, right? That's the important part. And that's why if you make the brokers go and then you open the economy back up, there's gonna be a lot more loads and people have to go get their CDLs. And so I think that would, you know, all three of them together, I think can do something substantial. So guys, I really look forward to hearing from you guys on this one. Comment below, what are your thoughts? Do you agree with some of these things? Or maybe you think that a minimum rate, just like there's a minimum wage, is a good idea, you know? So I really do look forward to your comments on this one down below, and I'll see you next time. Peace. Oh, and one quick final note I forgot to say is that I think that'll also aid in lowering the insurance premiums for most trucks, right? Because at the end of the day, I made a lot of beginner mistakes when I first started, and had I even just remotely read the book for the CDL, like most of those could have been avoidable, right? And so by forcing everyone to have at least some kind of standard of skill and knowledge, because that's what essentially getting a CDL would do, it would force the whole group to have a baseline that's slightly higher than now. That would in turn make it safer on the roads. And so I think by, you know, by doing all these three, especially making everyone go get a CDL, the roads would become safer and premiums could potentially drop. There's no guarantee, but I'm sure if the government was even thinking about something like this, the commercial insurance companies would be all over it, because I mean, at the end of the day, they're the ones paying out of pocket for all this stuff. You know what I mean? Because last I heard, commercial insurance hasn't been profitable for any of the companies, and so it's kind of tough. So I'm sure they would be on board with a new legislation or new laws that would make everyone go get a CDL. I'm sure they would be on board with that. And plus, that would also help all the four-wheelers. You know what I mean? They have to experience less semi-truck crashes and stuff like that. So ultimately, it's a win-win. Getting rid of people like me. I'm gonna say, you know, getting rid of people like me. But anyways, that was just last little bit I forgot to add. So yeah, that's it. Now we're good. Bye.